We stay at wide receiver for the second installment of Starter Spotlight here on Locked On Vols. Josh Ward stopped by for his weekly check-in, and it was a legend's birthday earlier this week in the realm of Tennessee athletics and really women's sports altogether. All that coming up here on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good Wednesday morning, everybody, and welcome into it. This is Locked On Vols. It is your go-to Tennessee Volunteers podcast each and every day. Can't thank you enough for tuning in, for watching, for making this your first listen. You can find it anywhere you get your podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Odyssey app, wherever you want to. But for taking time out of your day and hanging out with me, it means the world to me. Your engagement on Twitter, _Canner at Locked On Vols, the comment sections on YouTube, the likes, the hits. Thank you guys so much. Really, really do appreciate that. If you're new to the show, hey, I'm Eric Kane. I do radio in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I write for the rival site covering the University of Tennessee. That is VolQuest.com. And today we are going to continue on with our Starter Spotlight series. Yesterday, we spoke on wide receiver Cedric Tillman. Today, we will stay in that same position group. We'll catch up with Josh Ward. Of course, we're going to chat a little Pat Summitt in segment 3. But for our Starter Spotlight today, let's stay at wide receiver. Let's look opposite of Cedric Tillman, and let's go to Brew Mccoy. And, I'm calling this Starter Spotlight because these are the projected starters, right? There's no guarantee that this guy will start game one. There's no guarantee anyone will start game one. Football's a contact sport. You'll go through a camp season later this summer to where you're hitting and pads are popping and there can be injuries. You can get injured just walking into a clubhouse like Mike Soroka did last summer when he tore his Achilles again. Freak injuries happen, right? So I want you to know that this is all subject to change, and especially the guy like Brew Mccoy coming in because he is a new addition to the program, and so he'll have to come in and earn it. But if everything goes according to plan, there's no doubt about it. He will be the guy starting opposite of Cedric Tillman. So a little bit about Brew Mccoy. We spoke on Brew Mccoy a couple months ago when Tennessee picked up that commit, and we talked about the importance of it. And I know a lot of you guys probably tuned into that show, but he really is. He's super important to what Tennessee wants to do offensively this year. He is the prototypical outside wide receiver that Josh Heupel and Alex Golish like in their systems, without a doubt. He is long. He is explosive. He has down the field playmaking ability. He's a very crisp route runner. Anything you want to see in a wide receiver. Also, he rivals Cedric Tillman in terms of stature. Now, this isn't a basketball team here, and so I keep talking about how Cedric Tillman's big, tall. Well, let's think about it. In football terms, 6'3", 6'4", if you're a wide receiver, is pretty tall, right? I know there's some quarterbacks that are 6'4", 6'5", but this isn't a basketball team. Brew McCoy is as tall as Cedric Tillman, at least on the depth chart, or at least in the program, 6'3" frame. He weighs 220 pounds, so he is a bigger wide receiver, but he's fast. I think we all remember Brew McCoy from his recruiting days in terms of being a prospect. He was a 5-star prospect, and he has had quite the journey. It has not been easy for Brew McCoy. Some of this because of things outside of his control, some of it because of decisions that he's made. He has transferred a couple of times. He signed with Southern Cal, left and, transferred elsewhere, came back. He did not play in 2021 due to an off the field situation that needed to be resolved. And so it was. And so he hit the transfer portal and decided to come to Tennessee. In fact, Brew McCoy has got a lot of proving to do. He has not done anything on this level at the collegiate level. Let's be completely honest. In his career, Brew McCoy has played in 6 games. That was back in the shortened 2020 season. He has logged 21 receptions, 236 yards. He scored 2 touchdowns. He had 21 plays from the line of scrimmage, averaging 11.2 yards per touch. And, that's not horrible. I think he was the 3rd or 4th option that year for Southern Cal. But, that's not all SEC numbers. That's not enough. Typically that's a stat line for Cedric Tillman in one game last year, right? It's a good game, don't get me wrong, but it's one game last year. So I'm not sitting here saying Brew McCoy is going to save Tennessee's season because I don't believe that. But goodness gracious, think about the wide receiver position heading into last year. Everybody was dead set on Jalen Hyatt. And we'll get to Jalen Hyatt probably in tomorrow's starter spotlight as we continue on with the wide receiver conversation. We work our way through the offense. but it was all Jalen Hyatt talk. That did not materialize in year number one. Bayless Jones was getting some run, getting some talk because of the athletic ability of him, his speed, gadgets and whatnot. But again, he was kind of an afterthought. Nobody was talking about Cedric Tillman. And Cedric Tillman was the best one when it was all said and done. So the ability to work with the staff, work with Kelsey Pope at receiver, just kidding. Or yeah, Kelsey Pope. Now it was Cody Burns. Gosh, those names are kind of similar. Cody, Kelsey with both of the Ks. But Kelsey Pope at wide receiver, Alex Golish at, as the offensive coordinator, Hendon Hooker, and Josh Heupel overall as the quarterback coach and head coach, and Joey Halsey, seeing how you can develop under this coaching staff. The potential is through the roof for Brew McCoy. But as we spoke on in yesterday's show, and as I'll speak with Josh Ward here in a moment, Cedric Tillman outside of Hendon Hooker, the most important piece of this offense. But what makes Cedric Tillman go? He's going to get a lot more looks this year. Okay, you had Javonte Payton that was a down the field target, explosive playmaking receiver all year long. 18 receptions on the season, but he had 6 touchdowns. So you had safeties. Their eyes were looking opposite of Cedric Tillman over at Javonte Payton to make sure he wasn't getting behind them. You also had Bayless Jones, who could do literally anything from the slot, line up on the outside, line up in tight, sometimes line up in the backfield, go deep, stretch the defense with that speed, underneath routes, all that type of stuff. That took eyes off of Cedric Tillman. So you need that to happen again this year, and you need someone comparable to above comparable on the outside. And let's see if Brew McCoy can be that. Again, the talent level is undeniable. It's just, he has not had a smooth transition into the college game whatsoever, and it's a new start here at Tennessee, and we'll see what happens. No doubt about it. If he comes in, competes hard this summer, he's with the team right now, he's working out, stays healthy. Of course, he had a little minor offseason procedure. If he stays healthy and he takes care of business in the classroom and all that, and he goes in there and competes during camp, no doubt about it, in my mind, he'll be the starting wide receiver opposite of Cedric Tillman. So we'll see what happens. I think, again, a lot of proving to do for Brew McCoy, but the talent level's there. And think about how much in better shape the wide receiver room is now. And, there was a lot of great things said about Ramel Keaton and Jimmy Holiday coming out of spring practice, because you had Cedric Tillman, but you lost Javonte Payton, you lost Bayless Jones, Jalen Hyatt as a slot guy. And so you were trying to find another outside wide receiver. And, the coaches are never going to publicly dog their players or anything. But, from everyone I spoke to and from the coaches' remarks, they were very pleased with Ramel Keaton and Jimmy Holiday in spring practice. Those guys can still have a role potentially. Those guys can still be ready to roll and come in. But I don't think anybody sitting here wanted either one of those guys to be in the starting lineup. You need someone that has physically more gifted in terms of tools, someone who has a higher ceiling. And I think that is Brew McCoy. So we will see exactly, how he translates over. I am pegging him as a day one starter. If he stays healthy, we'll see how it goes. And I think that's kind of in the minds of the coaching staff as well. But if you have Cedric Tillman on one side, you have Brew McCoy on the other side, you have a Jalen Hyatt type guy in the slot from the middle, a lot of proving to do, don't get me wrong, but from a talent perspective, that is not a bad first trio that you throw out there for Hendon Hooker in this offense week 1 of the 2022 football season. So starter spotlight, Brew McCoy, put up or shut up time. What do you got? A new beginning, a new start, a new journey here in Knoxville for the University of Tennessee. I'm excited to see how he accepts that challenge and, what he does with it here coming up this fall. We'll continue with our starter spotlight. Tomorrow we will talk Jalen Hyatt. We'll go to that slot position. Then we'll work our way likely to tight ends, then into the running backs, offensive line. We might save quarterbacks for last, but you guys know I'm going to say, glowing remarks about Hendon Hooker, of course. But a new series here in the summer months of Locked On Vols. It's called Starter Spotlight, where we highlight a presumed starter each and every day here on the podcast. All right, when we come back, Josh Ward will check in for a little Ward Wednesday action. But I want to tell you about a new flavor of Built Bar today. It's called the Mud Pie. You know how our friends at Built are always coming up with amazing new flavors. Well, this time Built has truly outdone themselves with the new Mud Pie flavor. And for the first time ever, Built is introducing the new Mud Pie flavor in both Mud Pie Bar and Mud Pie Puff. Yeah, you heard that right. You've got to try the Mud Pie as soon as possible, all right? It's rich whipped cream, chocolate flavored, smothered in 100% real chocolate and topped with cookies and cream crumble. If you're a chocolate fan, there's no better one out there for you. Not convinced. Luckily, we saved the best for last. It's actually good for you as well. No, really. I mean, it truly is. All Built products are low in calories, high in protein, low in sugar. Mud Pie is packed with 16 grams of protein, only 150 calories, 8 grams of sugar. It's like your mom baked some delicious creamy chocolate pie and wrapped it up just for you. Like all Built bars, they're covered in 100% real chocolates. That means they're healthy and tasty. And you can check them out. All that's available at built.com right now. But hey, they are going fast. So you'll want to go ahead and get yours today. So go to built.com. While you're there, use the promo code LOCK15 and you're going to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off. That's all at built.com. Hey guys, another reminder, the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft starts June the 16th with over 50 insiders. Nothing equates to the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft. The Locked On NBA Big Board Draft experts plus Odyssey insiders. First pick is going to be on June the 16th. Search Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and follow now so you don't miss a pick. Welcome back into Locked On Vols. It is Wednesday. That means we bring on our buddy Josh Ward for a little Ward Wednesday action. Josh, what's going on today, man?
Eric, good to be with you as always.
Tennessee baseball, it's unfortunate. It's a bittersweet, not even bittersweet. It's a disappointing way to end such a fun and exciting season. Great year for Tony Vitello and the Tennessee baseball team, but ultimately falling to Notre Dame. A lot of heartache in Knoxville, and really, I understand baseball. It doesn't compare to basketball. It does not compare to the likes of football, of course. But a lot of people jumped on that bandwagon this year, and so a lot of people upset in the Knoxville area.
The level of interest and excitement this season with Tennessee baseball was closer to what we've seen with football and basketball than any time I can remember. Last year was really exciting. In 2005, when Tennessee went to the World Series, there was a big buildup to that. But this was the most excitement and the biggest following I can remember. And it's a different time, social media and all that stuff, I recognize. But it was a tremendous run for this baseball team and a lot of fun for fans. But we said during the season that is setting Tennessee up for more potential heartache if Tennessee doesn't get the job done, especially if Tennessee were to not make it to the College World Series, because there was the championship or bust conversation. What does Tennessee need to accomplish in the end to make this a complete success, besides obviously winning a national title? Well, I think everybody agreed, hey, if they don't get to Omaha, that would be a tremendous disappointment. And they didn't make it. It was a tremendous season, 57 wins, a regular season title, the tournament title. Tennessee did a lot of really good things and has a lot that it should be proud of. But all of that success in SEC play, Tennessee would trade to be in the position of Ole Miss or Arkansas. These SEC teams that Tennessee was better than during the regular season, Auburn, Tennessee would trade spots with them in a heartbeat.
So just to be clear, you're not, and I think I've asked you this before, you're not in the conversation of it's a failure of a season because you didn't make it to Omaha. I think you're more in line with what I would say is 5-10 years down the line, looking back, first word that would come to mind for me would say disappointing, because it ended this way, because you are the best team in the country, but you're not competing in Omaha for a College World Series championship.
Yeah, and again, that makes it hurt worse, because I think everybody agrees Tennessee was the best team, but just about everybody recognizes the best team does not always win. I'd say it's often the best team doesn't win in college baseball, which can be really frustrating for a lot of people to accept, especially if you're that team, if it's your school this year, and that is Tennessee. But yeah, in 5 years, 10 years, when I look back at this season, I'm going to remember how good Tennessee was. There's no denying. Nobody is shying away from the fact that the end result is extremely disappointing, because Tennessee was at home just needing to win 2 out of 3 games against a team that, again, everybody agrees is not as good as Tennessee. So Tennessee didn't get it done. There's also the element of the personality of this team, and there are a lot of people outside of Knoxville pulling against Tennessee. Now, objective observers, I don't know how many there are of those in college baseball truly, but I think there are people that saw Tennessee's personality and swagger and all the celebrating and did kind of like it. I think there are probably some players in college baseball that actually probably looked at Tennessee and said, you know what, that's kind of cool. That's why Tennessee has been and will be a destination that transfer players look at. But no doubt, a lot of people were pulling against Tennessee and took great pleasure in the disappointment on Sunday. And, you know, if you're a Tennessee fan that hops online, you know, a lot of listeners to this podcast maybe are on social media, on Twitter. They've enjoyed the ride and the celebrating, and then that makes it hurt even more to now have everybody else pointing and laughing at the result.
Yeah, this has been a face-off question before. This has been a five-burning question on our radio shows at 99.1 The Sports Animal. But now that the season is over for Tennessee baseball, let's ask it again. Who's the best coach on campus? Rick Barnes is the obvious answer. Tony Vitello certainly is making his case known right now and really over the past 5 years in terms of development and recruiting. Josh Heupel is here with football. You have Karen Weekly at softball. You got a lot of good coaches on campus. Who's the best coach right now? And maybe it depends on how you define it, because Rick Barnes could be for longevity, but what would you say?
Yeah, from an accomplishment standpoint, everything that Rick Barnes has done, not winning a national title, but conference championships and the amount of wins that he has a strong case to be a Hall of Famer. So that would put him at the top if you're looking at accomplishments for the conversation. If you're looking at it more of, okay, I can keep one coach and I have to replace everybody else, it's difficult to say anybody besides Tony Vitello to me, considering what he's done in 5 years coming into the best conference in the country. And when we talk about football, how good it is in the SEC, baseball's better in top to bottom in what the league does. Think about that. So to come into the league where Tennessee was at or near the bottom and bring Tennessee to the top so quickly it says so much about what he's able to do. Karen Weekly's done so much. If we come back to the accomplishments, Josh Heupel is a guy with a ton of potential offensively. If you go to just the specific skill set, offensively, he's right up there with the best in the country. Yeah. But I would come back to Tony Vitello. A lot of good coaches on campus. Brian Pinsky was a really good one. He just left to go to Florida State. Chris Woodruff's done a really good job with tennis. So the overall athletic department's in tremendous shape with the coaches. But if you said, Josh, you get to keep one coach for Tennessee and then you have to replace the rest, I would keep Tony Vitello.
Nico Iamaleava, Tennessee's five-star quarterback commit for the class of 2023, just went down and balled out in Las Vegas at the overtime 7-on-7 tournaments. Pretty much, if you are a highly rated 4-star, 5-star, you were at this thing for the most part, and it was a kind of a collection of stars. One MVP per On3's outlet of the entire 7-on-7 tournaments. And, Rivals just redid their rankings. He moved up one spot from 9th overall to 8th overall, still considered by Rivals at least the third quarterback in that class behind, of course, Arch Manning and I'm blanking on his name, but the quarterback commit to USC. What do you think about Nico right now? I mean, I was sitting back watching some of those clips, and I know it's 7-on-7. So again, that is not a true replication of what football is going to be. But his mechanics are so sweet. His feet work is good. He's got such a quick draw. He's so quick twitch. I mean, I continue to be more and more impressed with Nico the more I watch him work.
I think his talent and his skill set are the real deal. Now, how does that translate to playing in the SEC? And, of course, people are going to reply, well, okay, you got to put the pads on. You got to play 11-on-11, not 7-on-7. And that's totally true. But in terms of looking at the skill set and the talent and the upside, Nico's upside, his potential is as high as any quarterback in this class, I believe. And where he is right now, I mean, you can make a case for him as the number one quarterback in the country. I think there's real talent in this class. You probably agree. I think the analysts obviously do, because to be the number 3 quarterback, but a top 10 player overall, that says something. That's not the case every year at the position. So he has the ability, I think, to come in and be a game-changing player pretty quickly at Tennessee. And if we talk about what is the maximum potential of the offense with Josh Heupel, you need talent around the quarterback. You need a good enough offensive line. You need elite playmakers at wide receiver, and they're working on recruiting in that area too. But if you're going to reach your maximum potential, you need the best possible quarterback that can do a number of things on the field with his arm and his legs, and Nico fits that profile exactly.
All right, so starting a new series here on Locked On Vols called Starter Spotlight, where I'm pretty much running through all the projected starters, and I recognize there's a couple of position battles out there, but I'm kind of highlighting them, their accomplishments. Yesterday, when we kicked this thing off, I started with Cedric Tillman. Pretty easy one to start with, right? Preseason All-SEC pick, one of the better returning players in all of the conference. I truly do believe that if Cedric Tillman has a duplicate year that he had last year, Tennessee's offense is probably in good shape, and Tennessee's probably winning some games this year. Hendon Hooker is the most critical piece of this offense, no doubt, but Cedric Tillman's probably number 2. Would you agree?
Yeah, he's a really important player, and he's going to have more attention from opposing defenses. This time last year, almost nobody was talking about Cedric Tillman. We knew he was in the mix, but he was not talked about any way comparable to the way we talk about him now, having done what he did. And the most impressive thing to me last year, and a long list of impressive accomplishments from Tillman, was that some of his biggest performances were against the best teams they played. He didn't just put up big stats against weak opponents last year, but again, he will get more attention. But I think he'll also be a better player, right? Tillman has a chance to be a better receiver in 22 than he was in 2021. So let's see what kind of help is around him. Important year for Jalen Hyatt. Brew McCoy needs to make an impact immediately, and I think he'll have a chance to do that. Jacob Warren's going to be important in the passing game. There's some depth there, I think, to feel good about. But I don't think right now anybody questions who the number one wide receiver is. That's Cedric Tillman. And considering the work that he's put in to do what he has so far, I would expect him to be even better this year.
Jacob Warren, huh? Had to throw him in there?
Hey, Admiral Love. I'll stand up for him any chance I get.
No, a critical piece of this offense. He and Princeton Fan, the 1A, 1B situation at tight end, got better last year at that position, but I think both of those guys looking to take a step and kind of elevate that tight end spot. So I would agree with you there, despite his upbringing in that neck of the woods here in the Knoxville area.
Hey, bring me back on for the next starter spotlight if Jacob Warren's going to get some attention. Happy to talk about the Farragut alums anytime, especially those that are much more accomplished than me.
We'll pencil you in for sure. Josh and Swain, every single weekday, noon to 3 on the Sports Animal, 99.1 FM, 990 AM. Of course, you can listen worldwide on the WNML app, powered by Big Kahuna Wings. I don't know why I gave that drop there because this isn't a radio show. But nonetheless, what's coming up on the show the rest of the week here on a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday?
Yeah, we've been putting a bow on the Tennessee baseball season, and summer months are here, but we get closer. We're, about 11 weeks away, a little more than that, from Tennessee's football season starting up. So recruiting's a big focus, talking about that, all the summer sports that are going on, and everything else with Tennessee. Josiah Jordan-James, a guest on Tuesday, this past Tuesday on Josh and Swain. So if you want to go back and check that out, Josiah Jordan-James from Tennessee's basketball team.
Josh Ward, appreciate it, man.
You got it. Thank you.
All right, Josh Ward, every single Wednesday here on Locked On Vols. We call it Ward Wednesday, so set your timers and your alarms for that weekly programming. All right, we're going to come back, tie a little bow on this edition of Locked On Vols, so stay tuned. Be back in a second. Awesome stuff as always from Josh Ward as we welcome you back in here to Locked On Vols, a conclusion to a Wednesday show. And I teased it earlier in segment 1 in the cold open, but there was a legend's birthday earlier this week. In fact, it was on Tuesday for a former Tennessee head coach. Now, she is no longer with us. Of course, by now, you know it's Pat Summitt. Would have turned 70 years old on Tuesday. 70 years old. Taken from us way, way, way too soon from just a truly disgusting disease. Alzheimer's, dementia. My grandmother had it, and it is nasty. It makes the sweetest people just mean sometimes. And I'm not saying that about Pat Summitt. I'm just saying from my experience, sweet grandmother just turned into just mean, because frustration, because you can't remember anything, right? And it affects everybody different ways. But I hope and I pray that someday, of course, there's so many more advances into cancer treatments, and so I hope that we can continue to make strides into the memory loss type situations for the elderly, because it is just truly, truly heartbreaking to watch someone that you love and you admire kind of go out that way. So enough about that. But, Pat Summitt, of course, passed away way too soon a couple years ago because of Alzheimer's disease. And you continue to think about her and her family all the time. But her legacy lives on, no doubt about it. And again, we're talking about Pat Summitt today because it was her birthday yesterday on Tuesday when she would have turned 70 years old. Is Pat Summitt, we've had this conversation before a couple months ago, and I'm not trying to get into it just yet. Not trying to reset it again, even though it is summer and it's totally validated. Hey, when you're in sports radio, when you're in sports podcasting, it's the summer months, you can do Mount Rushmore. I don't care. Now, it's a lazy radio segment. I get it. But in the middle of the summer, you can do it. Coming from a guy that's in radio that takes pride in programming, you can do it. We're not going to do that today. We're not going, because we already did it a couple weeks ago because of somebody else's birthday that popped up or whatever. But Pat Summitt, in my opinion, would be number one on that list for the University of Tennessee if you were listing top 10 head coaches, top 10 Vols of all time, players and coaches, administration, announcers, whatever. Pat Summitt leads the way, and here's why. not only about her accomplishments, which were 8-time, she was a national champion, 8 national championships, 18 Final Fours. I recognize women's basketball today is much different than what women's basketball was when she was in her heyday. But you know why basketball is different today on the women's side? It's because of her. Women's college, I'll get into that in just a moment, but 18 Final Fours, 8 championships, national championships. 16 times she was the SEC tournament champion. 16 times she was the SEC regular season champion. All right. She was presented the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2012. She was a Sports Illustrated Sportswoman of the Year in 2011. She was the John R. Wooden Legends of Coaching Award in 2008. She's been the Naismith Coach of the Year for the 20th century in 2000. She's a 5-time Naismith Coach of the Year. She's a 3-time WBCA Coach of the Year. She was the AP Coach of the Year in 1998. She was the USBWA Coach of the Year in 98 as well. 8-time SEC Coach of the Year. Oh, and by the way, she was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame in 2000. She's in the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. She's in the FIBA Hall of Fame. She was a part of USA Women's Basketball at the Olympic level. So those are her accomplishments. I don't have to convince anybody of her accomplishments. We know that pretty much if there was a championship, she won it. If there was an award, she won it, But what she did, I look at it from a bigger picture here. What she did for the sport of women's basketball, okay? Women's basketball now, like going back to what I was saying just a moment ago, with how diverse it is and how there's so much parity. And it's not just UConn anymore. It's not just UConn and Notre Dame anymore. It's not just UConn, Notre Dame, and South Carolina anymore. It's not just UConn, Notre Dame, South Carolina, and Mississippi State anymore. You see what I'm doing here? I keep adding teams that have been very successful here in the last decade. It's completely different from what it was back in her heyday as coach. Now, it was getting better then. Don't get me wrong. It was getting better and better and better and better and better. But women's basketball, the sport, owes everything to Pat Summitt, putting it on the map, growing the game from a national level to a global level at points in times, inspiring young women to go out and be coaches just like her. Look at Kelly Harper, coaching, mentoring, all that and stuff. Gino Auriemma owes everything to Pat Summitt. Pat Summitt made Gino. The rivalry still lives today, even though Pat Summitt's gone. Gino, it's not like he's going out there talking bad about Pat Summitt, but he still has a distaste, a hatred for the University of Tennessee. He still makes comments about the University of Tennessee. The rivalry was great for the sport, but everything Gino is, and Gino is a Hall of Fame coach. He is fantastic. Everything Gino is because of Pat Summitt. So when I think of the top 5, top 10, Mount Rushmore, however you want to phrase it, Vols of all time, Pat Summitt is number 1 without a doubt. Yes, you guys can be up for debate. And again, I recognize I am 29 years old and it's a generation type thing. That's something I struggle with a lot of the times. I recognize that there were some greats in any sport. There were some greats, past, present, and all that. But I view now this generation pretty much of every sport as better athletes because, quite frankly, they are better athletes because they're bigger, faster, stronger, and the game has never been more tough than it is now. But that doesn't mean some of these athletes now couldn't go back a couple of generations and ball out in that era, or that doesn't mean you can't take an athlete, one of the greats from a past generation, put them in this generation, and they couldn't adapt and ball as well. I truly do believe that. But a lot of people will say General Nealon would be number 1. General Nealon would be my number 2. A lot of people will say Johnny Majors would be number 1. Johnny Majors would be my number 2. A lot of people say Peyton Manning should be number 1. Peyton Manning will be my number 4. I recognize that's heavy football, but it is what it is. Name recognition. You go anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, you say that you live in Knoxville, Tennessee, you went to the University of Tennessee, you're a fan of the University of Tennessee, name association. I guarantee you, everyone, without a doubt, will say, oh, Tennessee, Pat Summitt first. You'll get a lot of, oh, Tennessee, Peyton Manning, too. Yeah, that'll be second. Or that would be the second most first impressions in terms of name association, I promise you. But Pat Summitt will be number 1. Name association, it's incredible. So not only is she top the list for, Vols of all time, but if you were to make the case of Mount Rushmore coaches of all time, I mean, there's an argument that she's up there too, without a doubt, because again, it's the bigger picture here. Women's basketball as a sport would not be anywhere close to what it is today without Pat Summitt. An innovator, ingenuity of her, just incredible. So again, it was her 70th birthday, would have been her 70th birthday yesterday. Pat Summitt was taken from this world way too soon by a cruel and a nasty disease, but her legacy 100% lives on today, lives on in coaches all around the world, lives on in players all around the world, lives on in fans all around the world, and it will never, ever, ever go away. So happy birthday, Pat Summitt. Hope you're having a great time up there in heaven. All right, guys, that's going to do it here for this edition of Locked On Vols on a Wednesday. Be very, very thankful that you guys make Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day. Now, for your second listen, Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. It gives fans an in-depth look to the biggest prospects, the latest player rankings, and, of course, the big boards. Follow Locked On NBA Big Board every single day on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you find your podcast. Guys, we will have a Tennessee football player join the show on Thursday. I'm saying this, I'm pre-recording this before I've actually recorded the interview, so it's always nerve-wracking if something happens, they got to cancel, but I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. We will have a Tennessee football player on the podcast coming up tomorrow, so be sure to dial back in here to Locked On Vols. Guys, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, everybody.